The first time I heard those words, "You ruined our lives," I was standing in the middle of my own living room, stunned and silent, clutching a worn-out sweater I hadn't meant to take with me. The woman yelling was my daughter-in-law, Emily, her voice sharp enough to cut through years of quiet tension that had been simmering just beneath the surface. Behind her stood my son, James, arms crossed and eyes fixed somewhere far away, refusing to meet mine. My granddaughter Samantha threw a slipper at the wall just inches from me, while my grandson Ethan watched in silence, his face unreadable. No one stepped in to stop the chaos, not one person. And there I was, an old woman caught in the eye of a storm she didn't even know she'd started. How did it come to this? Why was I suddenly the villain in the only family I'd ever truly loved? I didn't have answers then, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay. So, with nothing but a single bag and a heart full of questions, I stepped out into the cold, uncertain of what waited for me on the other side. For decades, I had been the quiet presence in my son's home, the one who fixed breakfast, folded towels, and stayed out of the way. I thought that was enough. I thought love was silent sacrifice. But beneath the surface, resentment was growing like an invisible poison. It wasn't until a simple phone call, a routine checkup with the doctor, when I spoke honestly about James working small side jobs despite being on disability, that everything started to unravel. I didn't mean to betray anyone. I didn't realize those words would be the match that lit a fire I couldn't put out. Suddenly, the house that once held family memories turned into a battlefield. Whispered insults replaced greetings, doors closed where they once swung open, and the people I called loved ones transformed into strangers wielding cruelty as their weapon. Leaving wasn't easy. The cold night air bit through my thin coat, but it felt like a relief compared to the chill of their silent judgments. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, with creaky floors and walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments. But it was mine, a place where I could breathe without fear of being watched, judged, or blamed. For a while, the silence was comforting. Yet, loneliness crept in like a shadow I couldn't shake. Then, the phone started ringing, missed calls, desperate messages, all about Ethan, my quiet grandson who had watched his family tear me down without lifting a finger to help. Why was he missing? And why now, after all the years of being pushed aside? The answers weren't simple, and they certainly weren't what I expected. This story is not just about a family torn apart. It's about the courage it takes to stand up when you're told to stay small, about the love that refuses to die even when it's tested to the breaking point. So, what happened to Ethan? And what does it mean for the family I once knew? Stay with me as I share the journey of losing my place in the world and finding my true strength. After that night, when I walked out the door with nothing but a bag and a heart heavy with questions, the silence I stepped into was deafening. My little apartment wasn't much, just a cramped studio above a noisy nail salon, with thin walls and a drafty window that rattled every time a car passed by. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe without holding back, without pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Yet, that quiet soon turned into a crushing loneliness I hadn't expected. I'd left behind a house full of cold shoulders and whispered conspiracies. But now I faced the emptiness of my own making, and the echo of unanswered questions. Then the calls started. One after another, the screen flooded with missed calls and frantic messages from James, from Emily, even from Samantha. But the message that stopped my heart cold was from Ethan. "Grandma, he's missing. Please call." Missing. The word hit me harder than any insult, any slap of rejection I'd endured. Ethan, the quiet boy who had never raised his voice, who had silently witnessed the fracture of our family, was gone. And suddenly, the fractured pieces of my world threatened to shatter completely. I didn't trust their panic. After months of cold treatment, fake smiles, and biting words, I knew this wasn't just about concern, it was about damage control. They needed to save face, to erase the truth that had been lurking beneath their polished facades. But beneath the surface of their frantic calls, there was a different story, One I uncovered through a quiet voice on the phone, the school counselor. Ethan had been pushed out emotionally, made to feel weak and worthless by those who should have protected him. Samantha had called him pathetic for defending me, and Emily hadn't lifted a finger to stop it. That boy was their scapegoat, their way of trying to keep me silenced and small. When Ethan finally reached out to me, his voice was fragile, barely above a whisper. "Grandma, I'm safe, but I don't want to go back. They don't want me." My heart broke and mended in that moment. This wasn't just about custody or family drama, it was about safety, about finding a place where love wasn't conditional and fear wasn't the price of belonging. So I did what I never thought I'd have the strength to do. I opened my door, not to the family that had pushed me away, but to the grandson who needed me. And together, in a small apartment that smelled faintly of old coffee and second chances, we began to rebuild what had been lost. The road ahead wasn't easy. There were legal battles, whispered threats, and long nights filled with doubt, but every step forward was a victory. Because sometimes, family isn't about blood or shared walls. It's about the courage to protect each other when the rest of the world turns its back. What happened next wasn't just about a courtroom or a custody hearing. It was about reclaiming a life and rewriting a story that once seemed broken beyond repair. And as Ethan settled into our new home, finding comfort in simple routines and quiet moments, I realized something profound. Sometimes losing everything means discovering who you truly are and finding strength you never knew you had. The day I finally walked into that small legal aid office, clutching my worn-out papers and a grocery bag, I felt a strange mix of hope and fear swirling in my chest. For weeks, I had carried the weight of silence, the bruises of rejection, and the haunting worry for Ethan. But sitting there under the harsh fluorescent lights, watching the seconds tick by, I realized this was more than a legal battle. It was a fight to reclaim the dignity and safety that had been stripped away from us. The woman who called me back, Ms. Harper, was no-nonsense, mid-40s, sharp-eyed and efficient, but there was a kindness in her voice that gave me a sliver of courage. She asked questions I'd never dared to speak aloud. Has Ethan been physically harmed? Denied food? Kept from school? Each question hit me like a cold wave, yet I answered honestly, knowing this was our chance to be heard. I laid out everything, the voicemails, the texts, the cruel social media posts Samantha had thrown like daggers the night I left, calling me a parasite who had overstayed her welcome. Ms. Harper listened, taking notes faster than I could process, and then she leaned forward and said something that felt like a lifeline. "We can file for emergency temporary custody. It's not a guarantee, but based on this, you're on solid ground." Those words were the first glimmer of light after months of darkness. I left that office with my back a little straighter and a fragile hope growing inside me. Back at our little apartment, Ethan was waiting, headphones on, a plate of toast half-eaten beside him. When I told him about the legal step we were taking, his quiet nod said more than words ever could. "I'm not going back," he said softly, and in that moment, I knew this fight wasn't just about custody. It was about safety, respect, and breaking a cycle of silence and pain. The weeks that followed moved slowly, each day a cautious step forward. I cleaned more than ever, cooking meals that sometimes went untouched but symbolized a normalcy we both craved. Ethan started sleeping better, joked a little, and even drew pictures of our tiny apartment. 2 chairs at the table, sunlight streaming through the window, a stark contrast to the cold halls we'd left behind. But with hope came tension. The family didn't disappear quietly. I heard whispers, saw the way their messages turned from anger to threats veiled in concern, and I braced myself for the day they'd try to take him back. Then the court date arrived. I remember sitting in that sterile courtroom, Ethan beside me, both of us quiet but steady. The judge listened as the evidence unfolded. The messages, the counselor's letter, the painful truth of a boy caught between loyalty and fear. Emily appeared, thin and tight-lipped, her lawyer painting me as a meddling outsider. But the truth has a way of shining through lies. When the judge signed the order granting me temporary custody, I felt a weight lift, a moment of victory that was about more than just legal papers. It was a declaration that Ethan was safe, that our new life was real, and that no one could silence us again. Walking out hand in hand, the world felt different, uncertain, yes, but filled with possibility. That night, we ate grilled cheese on the floor because our tiny apartment didn't have a table yet, and I realized something profound. This wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming joy, safety, and the simple right to be loved on our own terms. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I knew we were finally free. Even though the judge's ruling granted me temporary custody of Ethan, the silence that followed was deafening. For 2 months, not a single call, text, or knock came from the family that had once filled the house with tension and cold whispers. No Emily, no Samantha, no James, just emptiness. At first, I wondered if this was a quiet retreat, a regrouping before another storm. But as days turned into weeks, I realized they had given up. They hadn't lost Ethan by accident. They had let him go the moment he stopped fitting the image they wanted to project, the obedient son, the perfect buffer to their fractured lives. And now, he was mine. Not in the way a court document claimed ownership, but in the way a heart chooses its own family, through trust, love, and quiet loyalty. Our apartment was still small, cramped even, with the faint hum of the nail salon below and the occasional creak from the aging floors. But it was home, a place where Ethan didn't have to tiptoe around whispers or hide behind silence. I started to notice the little things that made this place ours. The art he'd drawn, simple pencil sketches of sunlight through a window, 2 chairs around a table, and the peaceful moments between us that felt like tiny miracles. I made breakfast most mornings, and for the first time in years, Ethan actually ate it. He did his homework on the couch while I knit or watered the fake plant that sat by the window, a reminder that some things may never be real, but the care we put into them is. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself thinking about that moment I walked out of that house, the cold air biting through my thin coat, the hollow ache of loneliness that seemed endless. But then I remind myself, I didn't leave because I was weak or defeated. I left because I finally saw the truth. They would never stop trying to convince me I didn't matter. And that kind of love isn't love at all. Ethan understood that too. When he asked if I thought I'd ever go back, not to live but just to talk, I told him honestly I didn't know. Not yet. Maybe one day, but only on our terms, when the past no longer held power over us. He didn't press me, just nodded and passed me the last piece of toast like he was sharing a silent promise. In that simple gesture, I found a strength I hadn't realized I still had, a quiet resilience built on years of being overlooked, silenced, and hurt. Our future remains uncertain. Temporary custody doesn't guarantee forever. But for now, we have peace, safety, and each other. And that's enough to hold on to. This story isn't about revenge or bitterness. It's about breaking cycles, the cycles of silence, neglect, and cruelty that sometimes run through families like poison. It's about standing up when the world expects you to stay down, about protecting the ones who see you clearly even when no one else does. I didn't ruin their lives. I simply refused to play the role they cast me in. I walked away from being invisible and disposable. I took with me the one person who mattered most, and together we're writing a new story, one filled with hope, love, and the courage to live our truth. So, if there's one thing I want you to remember, especially those of us who have felt unseen or unheard in our families, it's this: your voice matters. Your love matters. And sometimes the hardest thing we do is also the most necessary: to walk away, to protect ourselves, and to build a new kind of family where we are finally free. It's been nearly a year since Ethan and I started this new chapter together, and every day still feels like a quiet victory. Our little apartment, once just a temporary refuge, has become a sanctuary filled with warmth, laughter, and a sense of belonging I thought I'd lost forever. When I look at Ethan, sitting at the small table doing his homework or sketching one of his little drawings of sunlight streaming through our window, I see not just my grandson, but a brave young man who chose hope over hurt, It wasn't an easy road to get here. There were moments when I doubted we'd ever break free from the shadows of the past. But we did, and in doing so, we rewrote what family means on our own terms. I think about the night I left the house for good, the cold air cutting through my coat, the echo of silence behind me, and how that moment felt like an ending. But now I know it was a beginning. I left not because I wanted to abandon my family, but because I had to protect the last piece of myself that was still whole. They tried to make me the villain, the troublemaker, the liability who'd brought ruin. But what they didn't see was the strength it took to walk away, to refuse to be invisible any longer, and to stand up for Ethan when no one else would. And Ethan, he's changed too. The quiet boy who once watched from the sidelines is now finding his voice. He laughs more, sleeps better, and even talks about the future with a flicker of hope in his eyes. It's in the small things: a shared meal, a smile over a silly joke, a hug that doesn't feel rushed or fearful, that I see the healing taking root. This isn't just about custody or legal battles. It's about reclaiming a life where love isn't conditional and safety isn't a privilege. Sometimes I wonder if the others will ever come back, not to reclaim what they lost, but maybe to find some kind of peace or understanding. But for now, I don't dwell on that. I focus on the here and now, the slow, steady rebuilding of trust, the moments of quiet joy that feel like a balm to old wounds. We're not perfect. We're still learning, still growing. But we're free from the shadows that once threatened to consume us. This story isn't just mine or Ethan's. It's for anyone who has ever felt silenced, overlooked, or pushed away by the very people who should have been their refuge. It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love is the courage to walk away from pain and fight for a new beginning. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from our journey, it's this. No matter how deep the hurt or how dark the night, there is always a way forward. There is always hope. So, to anyone watching this who feels lost or alone, remember, you are not invisible. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself and those who truly see and love you. Because in that choice lies the power to heal, to grow, and to build a future filled with light. There's a quiet strength that grows in the moments between chaos, when the world has pushed you to the edge, but you find a way to stand tall anyway. That strength is what Ethan and I have discovered together in our little apartment, far from the cold stares and harsh words that once defined our days. Looking back, it's almost surreal to remember how fragile everything was. The loneliness, the fear, the feeling that we were utterly alone against a family that had turned its back. But here we are now, weaving new memories from the threads of pain and hope, learning what it means to be family on our own terms. Every morning, I wake up to the soft hum of the neighborhood waking up outside our window, the distant sounds of cars, birds, and neighbors chatting over fences. It's ordinary, almost mundane, but to me, it feels like a blessing. I watch Ethan, my grandson who once felt invisible, sitting at the kitchen table with his messy homework spread out in front of him. The way he furrows his brow in concentration, occasionally glancing up with a small smile, tells me he's healing. Slowly, piece by piece, we're building a life where he's not just surviving, but thriving. The journey here wasn't easy. I still remember the cold night I left the house, the sharp sting of rejection, and the hollow ache that followed. I was pushed out, blamed for breaking a family that was already fragile, but I chose to walk away rather than become silent and small again. That decision scared me more than I can say, but it saved me. And it saved Ethan. When he finally reached out, scared and tired, I opened my door without hesitation. I knew then that protecting him meant everything. We've had our battles since, court hearings that felt like trials not just of law, but of our very worth. I faced a courtroom filled with doubt and disbelief, while Ethan sat quietly beside me, his trust in me shining brighter than any judge's gavel. When the temporary custody order was signed, it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a declaration that our bond mattered, that safety and love were rights, not privileges. Some days, I still wonder about the family we left behind. Will they ever understand what was lost? Will they see that the truth they tried to bury was the only thing that could set us free? But those questions no longer hold me hostage. Our focus is on the here and now, the laughter that sometimes bubbles up during a shared meal, the quiet comfort of a book read aloud, the gentle rhythm of a life rebuilt from the ground up. This story, my story, is for anyone who has felt pushed aside or silenced by those they loved. It's a reminder that you don't have to stay in a place that dims your light or breaks your spirit. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not into darkness, but toward a new dawn where you can finally be seen, heard, and loved for who you are. So, if you're watching this and feeling lost, remember that your story isn't over. Your strength is greater than you know, and your heart holds the power to heal and rebuild. Like Ethan and me, you can find peace beyond the pain. And sometimes, the family you create with love and courage is the one that truly lasts. There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew suddenly shifts beneath your feet, leaving you standing on uncertain ground. But it's in those moments that we often find our deepest strength. For Ethan and me, that moment came quietly, without fanfare. In the stillness of our small apartment one chilly autumn evening. We'd been through so much. The hurt, the betrayals, the legal battles that felt like mountains we'd never climb. But as I watched Ethan carefully place a fresh drawing on the wall, I realized we had arrived somewhere unexpected. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace you find by erasing the past, but the kind that grows when you choose to carry your scars as a reminder of how far you've come. Watching the soft light fall across his face, I felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the victory of custody, but for the quiet moments that made this house a home. The journey here was anything but easy. I still remember that night I left my son's house, the cold biting through my thin coat, the echo of their angry words ringing in my ears. They blamed me for the cracks that had long been there, for speaking truths they wanted buried. I was made to feel like the outsider, the problem, the woman who had ruined their perfect little world. But what they didn't understand was that the real damage was done long before I said a word. It was done by the silence that allowed cruelty to fester, by the coldness that turned family into strangers. And so, I left, not out of defeat, but out of a fierce determination to protect what little was left of my dignity and to be there for Ethan, the one who still saw me. When he reached out, scared and alone, I opened my door without hesitation. Our new life began in a cramped, noisy apartment far from the house where love had turned bitter. It was there that I learned the true meaning of resilience. Every day brought challenges, navigating courtrooms, facing judgment, and battling the haunting question of whether we'd ever truly be safe. But it also brought hope, hope that grew in quiet conversations, shared meals, and the simple joy of watching Ethan smile without fear. The court's decision to grant me temporary custody was more than just a legal victory. It was a validation of our truth, a declaration that love and safety are rights, not privileges. But what mattered most wasn't the papers or the courtroom. It was the bond we rebuilt, the trust we nurtured, and the future we dared to imagine. There are still days when I wonder if the others will come back, if the family we left behind will ever acknowledge the pain they caused. But those thoughts no longer weigh me down. Instead, I focus on the here and now, on the laughter that echoes through our small apartment, the art that decorates our walls, and the quiet strength that fills every corner of our lives. To anyone listening who has felt pushed aside or silenced, I want you to know this. Your story isn't over. Your voice matters. Sometimes, the hardest choice is the one that leads to freedom, the freedom to protect yourself, to stand up for those you love, and to build a life where you are truly seen. Ethan and I found that freedom not in the past we left behind, but in the love we hold today, and that is a story worth telling. There's a moment, often quiet and almost imperceptible, when the weight of what you've endured begins to shift, not because the pain disappears, but because you decide it no longer controls you. For Ethan and me, that moment came slowly, like the first light creeping over the horizon after a long, dark night. After months of uncertainty, legal battles, and the lingering shadow of a family torn apart, we started to feel something new. Hope. It wasn't a sudden spark, but a gentle glow, growing stronger with every shared meal, every peaceful night's sleep, every laugh that slowly returned to our small apartment. When I look at Ethan now, this young man who once felt invisible and alone, I see resilience in his eyes, a quiet determination born from hardship, but unbroken by it. Leaving my son's house was the hardest thing I ever did. The cold night air bit through my coat, but the real chill was in their eyes, the coldness of rejection, the harshness of words meant to wound. I was blamed for tearing the family apart, accused of ruining what they called our lives. But I knew the truth wasn't so simple. The cracks had been there for years, hidden beneath polite smiles and quiet dinners. My honesty about James's side jobs, a truth I spoke without malice, became the excuse to push me out. Yet, it was their silence, their cruelty, that truly broke us. I left not because I wanted to abandon my family, but because I had to protect the last pieces of love and dignity I had left, and to protect Ethan, the one who still believed in me. When Ethan reached out, scared and desperate, I didn't hesitate. Opening my door to him was opening my heart to healing. Our new life began in a cramped apartment filled with the sounds of a busy neighborhood and the scent of second chances. It hasn't been easy. There have been battles in courtrooms, whispered threats, and moments when the past threatened to consume us. But with every challenge, we found strength in each other. The court's decision to grant me temporary custody was more than just a legal win. It was a recognition of our truth and a promise of safety. Some days, I still wonder if the others will ever come back, not to reclaim what they lost, but to seek understanding or forgiveness. But those questions no longer hold me captive. I focus on the present, the laughter that fills our home, the drawings Ethan makes of sunny rooms and 2 chairs at a table, and the quiet moments that stitch our hearts back together. This story isn't just mine or Ethan's. It's for anyone who's ever felt unseen or unheard by those they love. It's a testament to the power of standing up, walking away from pain, and choosing a new path filled with love and respect. If you're listening and feeling lost or invisible, know this. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose yourself, and in doing so, find the family you were always meant to have. Ethan and I did. And that choice changed everything.